Hi, everyone. We are
Hi.
so happy to have you all here with us. We're so happy to have Dr. Leigh Connealy here this evening and to gather. Gathering is a big part of what it means to live the Sakara life, to be on this journey together. For those of you who are avid listeners to the podcast, we've had Dr. Connealy on before. And it was such a popular episode, but also such an important conversation that a couple of years later we wanted to bring back. A couple things that have been on my mind, which is why we wanted to bring this conversation in at this time, is that cancer rates are at an all-time high, and we'll get into the details of that. And I think what people don't understand is that we have so much control over our health, but we don't know what the control panel looks like. I read a stat recently that said fewer than 3 out of 10 women listed diet and lifestyle as one of the things they could do to lower their chances of getting breast cancer. So I think we have a lot of misunderstandings about what cancer is in general, what's in our control, what's not in our control, both before we get cancer, but also once we get a cancer diagnosis that can obviously feel so scary. What are our options? So Dr. Connealy has a beautiful story about what brought her to this mission. She's also just such a bright light and beautiful spirit. And though I know it can feel like a heavy conversation, brings so much hope to the conversation in general, but also to what we can really do to impact our lives, impact our health, impact our health span. So without further ado, let me give her bio a proper intro here. So Dr. Connealy is a leader in the integrative medicine space. She's known for her patient-first approach and for her focus on preventing cancer through addressing patients and their lifestyle habits rather than just the disease. She's the medical director of the Cancer Center for Healing and the Center for New Medicine, which sees patients from all over the world. Dr. Connealy is the author of The Cancer Revolution and Be Perfectly Healthy. And for the past 10 years, she's been named one of the top 50 integrative doctors in the country. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Leigh Connealy. Hi, Dr. Connealy, welcome.
Yay, welcome.
Thank you, guys. It's wonderful to be here with ladies who are transforming health in a whole different way than me.
We're so grateful to have you. We like to start off the podcast. I don't know if you remember, but we like to start off the podcast with the same question, no matter who we have on. So the question is, what is your mission here on Earth? What are you here to do?
Oh, wow. Well, in one sentence, I would say I would love to transform the future of humanity and healthcare, because everyone just doesn't know, like you were saying before, most people just don't know what's in their own control. And so much of it is in your own control. And self-care is the new healthcare. And in my book, I talk about all the things that you can do yourself without a doctor. And in fact, in the book, Radical Remission, these were people with stage 4 cancers, and they reversed their stage 4 cancer. And 8 out of the 10 things were things their doctor didn't tell them. And so it was just the things they did at home, whether it was a keto eating or coffee enemas or baths or, sauna and all these things. So today, to be healthy is a secret. And I know that you ladies are all trying to educate and inform and inspire people to live a different way. And this needs to be a contagious revolution, not only in the United States, but in the world.
So true. And can you tell everyone listening right now what brought you to this mission, this work, specifically this work in cancer? Your personal story is just so powerful.
Right. So I was born in the 50s. I'm number 3 of 6 children. My mother started bleeding and she went to the doctor, and the doctor said, we have a medication called diethylstilbestrol, and that will preserve the baby and stop the bleeding. So of course, any pregnant mom with a child would want to keep their baby. So she took that medication. Fast forward, when I'm a teenager, my parents receive a letter stating, you were administered a drug called DES, and that drug we have found caused increased cancer in both male and female offspring, hormone problems, infertility, anatomical problems, and, so many other things. And so I was in high school in biology, and I thought, oh, I'm really good at science. What can I do? So I set a course of wanting to be a doctor. And after going to MD Anderson and being examined by a dozen people, and here I am, a teenager, and you don't even go to the doctor when you're a teenager, really, and getting poked and prodded and biopsied and all those things. And I went to graduate school at UT, and I did my thesis on DES, and I'm thinking, oh my God, they knew this drug had carcinogenic potential, but they continued to use it, just like medications today. So it's kind of been my mission to really educate people on what they're doing and the choices they're making and looking at the good, bad, and the ugly. And I've had multiple curveballs and detours as a result of the DES. And it hasn't been an easy road, but I always tell people 2 cardinal rules. You can't become your problem. You can't own your problem. Everything is a learning episode to transform yourself and to help others transform themselves. And so I've lived like that. And here I am, 67. I work, probably 7 days a week. I just have this, mission to let everyone know what I get to know. And because today I had our meeting, we have a meeting every Tuesday, and all the doctors, we talk about cases. And today we had a special speaker. And this doctor is an interventional radiologist. And he was telling us about a doctor he treated. And the doctor was, all of a sudden had pain in his back, couldn't walk, and severe, dysfunction. So this is a physician now, mind you. And so he goes and gets exams, and there's a tumor on his spinal cord. So sure enough, they go, okay, we got to remove it. They did surgery. It grew back in 4 weeks. And then they said, oh, we better go do surgery again, but we're going to do chemotherapy. They did that. It grew right back. So the doctor I had visiting is an outside the box doctor. And he said, he was visiting, and his friend, he says, we have this friend, he's a doctor, he has this tumor, can you help him? Sure enough, he did cryo, and if you know what cryo was freezing, froze the tumor, and the doctor has his life back. But he went to Stanford and UCLA to get help, and they didn't have the help at some of the top universities in the United States, because you can't use the treasures of just the United States. You have to use the treasures worldwide. And, US is only 4 to 5% of the population. And what they're doing in India, Africa, Europe, or other places, we have to utilize their techniques, their testing, and everything. And I think that the doctors here have so much cognitive dissonance about wait, another doctor in another country is doing something unique. Well, maybe we need to take a look at this. And so I've had the privilege of meeting all these people all over because of my own personal interest for my own health problems and my patients' problems. And this is the way it should be. There's a new book called Blind Spot by Dr. McCary, and he's a conventionally trained doctor out of Johns Hopkins, and he's talking about the things we're not looking at. And all of us need to be an open landscape to everything, whether it's child rearing, whether it's, really, really amalgamating your marriage. Is it learning new financial things? Whatever it is, we need to be open to the treasures and the miracles of the universe.
It's so true. And I think about this a lot because I grew up, my mom, was really sick. She was in and out of the hospital. She's had over, I think it's probably 26 surgeries in her life. And nobody ever was willing to have the conversation with her about how her past trauma and her kind of current emotional, mental well-being was impacting her health. She just hopped from doctor to doctor. And what I love that you talk about, because you also use kind of conventional modalities for getting through cancer from chemo and radiation, but also integrates information from all over the world, as you said. But also what you said earlier was so perfect and poignant that you can't own your problem. You have to go after the solution yourself. And I saw it in my mom so many times, and I can empathize with it so much that she got a diagnosis and then she wanted to be able to fall into the hands of a practitioner and relinquish her responsibility to an expert. And whenever we are faced with disease or, non-health, I understand the desire to do that. We all have the desire to do that. But that's actually the pivotal moment where, we need to take control of what is on our control panel and understand what are those options. And seeing my mom do that really taught me that I was the one that was going to have to look out for my health, because even though I know so many of those doctors had the best intentions, their control panel was different than hers, and only she could control hers. And so when you talk about that control panel for people who, want to, avoid getting a cancer diagnosis, I read it's 40% of the population, American population, will get a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime. Maybe it's higher now. I don't know. That might be old. But what are some of the things on that control panel? I've heard you talk about a whole food diet, focusing on clean food, even if it's ice cream, I've seen you, but you make it yourself, all the way to kind of spiritual aspects to trauma, et cetera. So how would you kind of define that control panel that you've been using to avoid the cancer diagnosis?
Right, because there is so much in control. In fact, there was a study that came out not too long ago, and they talked about basic things that you could reduce your incidence of cancer by 50% or more. And that's basically is don't smoke, don't drink, exercise, get sunshine, don't be overweight, and eat a whole foods diet. I mean, really not complicated things, okay?
Yeah.
And I think mentioned your statistics. It's about 1 in 2 people now. But the worst part is it's expected to grow 30% in the next 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So luckily yesterday I saw a patient and it was so refreshing because she goes, I said, so, why are you here? And she goes, I just don't want to get cancer. And I said, well, how did this arouse in you? Because I would like that to happen to all people, is that they were interested in not just prevention of cancer, but any disease. Because it's so simple to prevent the disease if you go to a doctor who really knows how the whole body works. And so she said, well, my friend is here in our center, because we have 2 centers, the Center for New Medicine, which is human optimization and chronic diseases. And then the other side is Cancer Center for Healing. So she's 35 years old with stage 4 lung cancer. And her other friend was there for breast cancer. So she goes, my mom just died 3 weeks ago of ovarian cancer, and I am scared of getting cancer. So I said, well, there's no better place. And we're going to figure this out in a week. And I will tell you what you need to do. And it will be very easy to figure out whether you have cancer, because cancer is about a 10-year disease. So I drew extensive blood tests. I said, because your mother just died, I want you to do emotional work. So we do something called EVOX, and EVOX is a device where you just start talking and your brain is programmed on the computer and it communicates with the practitioner, like what is really, maybe you don't deserve to be healed. Maybe you feel abandoned, whatever it is, the practitioner knows. And then they transform that unfavorable frequency into a favorable frequency with affirmations and sound and music. So it's really and it works immediately. And each session is about 3 or 4 therapy sessions. So the patient gets immediate treatment. And then I said, we're going to check all your nutrients. And I said, we're going to look at your blood under the microscope, and I'm going to do a liquid biopsy, and I'm going to do a bioimmune survey. And all of this stuff is not expensive, guys. It's not expensive. It's not really expensive for anyone. Okay.
Can you ask your functional medicine doctor to do this? Or is this something you need to come to a specialist to do?
We are experts in cancer prevention and early detection. And I teach this, guys. It's not like I keep it a secret. I teach doctors. I mean, I am a megaphone out there. So it's not like I don't teach everyone. Okay. But I find that it's really the personal interest of the doctor and their bandwidth and their capability. And cancer is a scary field for most doctors. Okay. Now, oncologists, cancer doctors, they strictly just treat you. If you get diagnosed, here's your surgery, your chemo or radiation and some combination. They never bother to know why, where, when, and how you have this disease. As you know, Danielle just talked about her mother who's had 26 surgeries and really did not really kind of research and devour and educate herself, if I'm saying that correctly, Danielle.
Yeah. No,
and
not at
she
all.
just took the trust and trusted the doctor, which is important to do. But I always tell the patient, look, you should go to 10 doctors and get 10 different opinions, especially if something really complicated. But you really need to know that the doctor really has an understanding of like cancer and early detection. Okay. It's not,
Right.
I take what we do for granted because I do it every day. Right. But
Right.
I think like recently, how many doctors are talking about how many young people have cancer right today? But so why aren't we talking about prevention, guys? And you can just research and look at prevention of cancer and find lots of things. But do you know that doctors are not talking to the patients about anything?
Mm.
So why is that? Where is the Grand Canyon gap that doctors are saying, I'm not seeing anyone older than 45. All these patients are 30, 35, 40 years old with cancer. So if you see this alarm 911, then you should say, we better devour how to prevent cancer. And that's where you're going to help people because you guys have never worked with cancer patients, probably, unless you've had a family member, you'll see and experience it. But cancer is, most people, they're very scared, even if they have just a lump in their breast and it's a small lump and it's easily fixable. It's a scary diagnosis. Heart disease, for some reason, isn't that scary for most people, but cancer is like so scary. And I find that the patients, just from their diagnosis, have so much PTSD just from that alone. And I would say the most common thing I hear every day from every new patient is they don't like their doctor.
Mm.
Their doctor scares them, tells them if you do anything else, I'm not going to be your doctor. I'm going to fire you if you go get IV vitamin C. I'm like, this is terrible,
And so with this girl that comes into you, so you do all of this work to test her, right?
Right. And then
then
I direct her and tell her, okay, here's what you need to do. And it may be, a cleanse. It may be doing, most people today I find have fungus. And I would say 2 weeks ago, I had a citizen scientist from London give a lecture on our podcast that we do, the Cancer Conversation. And he talked about fungus and cancer. Now, he's not the first person ever talked about, but he gave an incredible lecture of how fungus is one of the biggest contributors to cancer. Well, why do we have so much fungus today? Well, most people eat sugar as their main nutrient.
Ultra-processed foods.
Yeah, ultra-processed foods, and they all have sugar in them. Most people take antibiotics throughout their lifetime, right?
Mhm.
And then once you take antibiotics once, you're at risk for growing a crop of fungus. And fungus grows in a sugary, acidic, anaerobic environment. And then when everyone's toxic from eating the processed food and eating the ultra processed sugary cereal, like the average kid eats cereal every morning. Well, cereal is like eating a candy bar. And then they go to school with the sugary bread with sugary peanut butter and sugary jelly and sugary sunflower chips, and then a sugary drink. All right. And then they go home to cookies after school. And then they have spaghetti or macaroni and cheese and whatever. And I'm like, I don't know how you're going to function, And then they want to know why their kid has ADD, because you cannot do that. All right. If you follow anthropological studies, the people who survived are people who ate whole foods and real foods. And you get full on real foods. You're not hungry, when you eat.
Yeah,
fruits.
your brain tells you to stop because the fiber expands in your stomach, sends that signal to your brain. You're like, oh, I'm full.
Exactly.
Doesn't do that with highly processed.
I think this is a theme, it doesn't matter the diagnosis. It doesn't matter if it's, about weight. It doesn't matter if it's about mental health. I think the conversation around what you do every day impacts your well-being. It's still a new conversation. And even for people that it's not a new conversation, I think it's still very hard for people to understand that what they do every day, how they nourish, what they think, the inner narrative, who they surround themselves with, the types of food they eat, that those things ladder up into who you are. I think that's still a radical concept for a lot of people, and especially around this conversation of cancer, because I remember being taught in pre-med, that, cancer was something, it wasn't about lifestyle.
Genetic.
I'm not that old, it wasn't that long ago.
It came from your parents.
That it just, and it wasn't it wasn't called a lifestyle disease. And it's still not really called a lifestyle disease, even though I remember from our last podcast, you said, I think it's less than 3% of cancers are genetic. And so where do you think that, hasn't happened? Why is there such a deep canyon between what we believe and what is true when it comes to cancer?
Well, you also have to think as what sells, right?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, most of the things in the grocery store are not good for you, right?
Yeah.
And they're laced with all kinds of chemicals and dyes and everything. And I think the number one thing, so look if you look at the stats in Japan, the obesity rate is 3 to 4%, where it's 60% here, because their fast food is sweet potatoes on the streets. Okay. So, it's not churros. It's not chocolate chip cookies, guys. And if you look at the cookies in Japan, they're about a size of a quarter.
Yeah.
And they're so beautiful that you wouldn't want to eat them. But it's all about our public health. Our public health, you're right, Danielle. It's not about how do we take care of ourselves? How do we nourish ourselves? They should be having parenting classes about, how to feed our kids and how to make food that's attractive. I know even when my kids are grown adults now, but I remember my daughter played club soccer and I brought oranges and apples as the snack. I think people looked at me like, what planet was I on? Because back then people brought those stupid cupcakes and those bagels or whatever. And I was like, no, I can't do it. I cannot be a part of this. This is not, I have to make a statement. I don't care what it is, and that's the way it was. But you're right. People are, I don't think they're that interested. You know what makes them interested? Getting a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Getting a diagnosis is really what decides to wake people up. Because I always ask patients in their history, I'm like, so what made you to decide to look at your life? And the first thing that every patient changes when they get diagnosed with cancer, I've asked every single patient for the past 5 years, the number one thing they've changed is what they eat. So subconsciously, they knew that donut wasn't healthy, but they ate it anyway.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, I grew up in the 50s and my mother was a nut about our food. Okay. But we'd go over people's houses and we'd go, wow, how do they have donuts and we don't? So people have been doing this for years. It's just the food industry, I would say, is more contaminated and more addicting than ever. And
yeah, I think that's a big part of it, is like recognizing that it's actually harder than ever to be healthy. I mean, you go to the grocery store and 90% of it, I'm like, I wouldn't put this in my body. I wouldn't put it in my children's body. Like, that makes life really hard. I mean, we're so far away from growing our own food. We're so removed from the things that nourish us. We outsource it. And it's like, though I can't imagine, in New York City, how am I going to have my own farm on my little terrace? But it's like, it would be nice if we could go to the grocery store and really trust things. And even honestly, going to the farmer's market, it's like, I have to dig, I have to ask. Like, it's not just because it's at the farmer's market that it's clean, and it's heartbreaking. And I hear people get annoyed with me where it's like, oh God, it's like from the farmer's market, relax. And I'm like, look, I get it. I'm as exhausted as you are, but I know the state of food. I mean, we've been food manufacturers for 13 years. And not only do we know the state of food from like agriculturally, but the state of manufacturing food is one of the scariest places. I mean, the amount of decisions that Whitney and I and the executive team have to make on a daily basis to make sure that we are going to deliver high quality food.
And the costs associated?
And the costs associated when the consumer would never know. The consumer would never know, if you use a different kind of olive oil that's half canola oil, because you still get to label it olive oil if it's a percentage olive. Like, there's literally millions of choices like that. And so when we're so far removed from where our food is grown, how our food is made, what it is to nourish us, I think we have to really just kind of admit how hard it is to take care of ourselves. And then once we admit that, then we can be our own best advocates. Like, it's gonna be hard. It's not gonna be like you get to just walk through the grocery store and get whatever, and walk through the farmer's market and make whatever. Like, you have to be this advocate in a way that I think people are tired. Like, are tired of, like, why do I have to fight? I remember my grandfather, I was very close to. He died at 99, like healthy as a horse. And I remember in his late 80s, his doctor started putting him on Ensure. And, that was early in my nutrition career, but I still knew that Ensure was bad. It said, high fructose corn syrup. So I tried to explain it to him, and he just couldn't understand why something in the grocery store wouldn't be good for him. It's like he couldn't fathom.
Or why his doctor would even prescribe that.
Would tell him to take it. And so I never convinced him. But, I think it's a leap for people to believe what we're saying.
Well, it's true, because people want to think that, well, why would that person give me something so bad?
Yeah.
But it happens every day, everywhere. They thought opioids weren't bad, guys.
Yeah.
And look what's happened, all right? And no one thought hand washing 200 years ago, when Dr. Semmelweis said we should hand wash keep our hands, not gloves, before we deliver babies. That took 100 years. It took over 50 years for them to have lemons and limes on the boats to prevent scurvy. They thought it was some rare, bizarre disease. It was a vitamin C deficiency. And I tell everyone now, we don't have a year, much less 50 years. The time is now for all of us to wake up, pay attention, become a forensic, and analyze everything you're doing, everything, because every decision you make is a healthcare decision. And so that's the way you need to become. And that's not a bad thing, because you're going to be making your brain work. Okay. So you're going to be preventing dementia and forgetfulness, and you're going to be creating more neurons, and you're going to be preserving the human that we need to have to take care of us and live with us every single day. So this is now not an optional thing. This is a must do and take action. And I have lots of faith, because almost every 30-year-old I have, give or take 5 years, is passionate about this. So they are going to be, they're going to be the change makers. So I would say a lot of the new podcasts I do, they're young people who truly want to change, and transform the future of health and humanity. So it's happening. We just have to keep, people always like, oh my God, all my friends say that, oh my God, you just work all the time. I'm like, no, I need to work because we have got to change the way things are. And if you look around you, you guys, babies are sick. One of my patients came in from New York. She's a nurse practitioner and she works at NYU. And she's a pediatrician, nurse practitioner. She's had leukemia before. And then she came to me to get healthy. And then she got pregnant and had a baby and everything's hunky-dory. But I said, what is the health of the baby that you're seeing at NYU? And she said, it is horrific. The babies are so sick and obese and diabetic, and these are babies.
Yeah.
And I told her, so I gave her pointers of what she could do in the clinic. And then she was telling, like I would tell them, have them do a food journal for you. Have them a list of foods, of affordable foods that they could have. Have them on a one-pager, okay? And give him sample meals. I said, I will share with you things that you can do to make it easy. And then when they come up with their follow-up visit, make them accountable. You have to make people accountable. And I mean, who wants to have a sick baby? You guys have children. You guys know it's horrible when they just have.
And it's exhausting too. It's exhausting in America to take them to school and have to I literally just wrote a very stern email with research papers on cognitive function as it pertains to nutrition in young kids, including organic food can, have a positive impact on cognition over time and neurological development. It's but I'm like, I can't believe I have to convince people that whole foods covered in fewer pesticides is probably good for our kids. But I also get it because you don't see, I always said when we first started Sakara, it was very early in kind of the movement of wellness. And we had to really convince people of what organic was, why it was important, because you look at your kale that's conventional versus organic and it looks the same. And so it can feel hard to grasp. I don't know if this is worth it. Most of us are so kind of far removed from our own body intelligence that we can't even necessarily feel the difference over time on organic versus conventional. But I think, this conversation can quickly become overwhelming, I think. And so how do you find the joy in taking care of yourself? Because, you said, we were talking about earlier, it's you got to do the things, you got to fight for the clean food, you got to fight for, in school, it's you have to be your own best advocate. And if you have a family, their best advocate in health, much less disease. And so how do you find joy in it? How do you not get overwhelmed by a wellness to-do list, which I think people have these days?
Well, I think that's your number one thing. I remember when I had kids years ago, I woke up early before my kids woke up. So I would have everything prepared from their food and their activities. And so I found so much joy in planning my children's day because I felt like I was reliving my kids' childhood. And I remember planning all their meals, and I would have babysitters to help me do certain things after school, especially if they had to be going to sports. But that is just the way we lived, okay? And I'm like, you're either making a right decision or a wrong decision. So, when mommies think, I remember lecturing at a school here in Orange County, and I asked they were kindergartners or first grade, and I said, okay, what does everybody eat for breakfast? And they're like, cereal. And I'm like, so I had to kind of joke around. And then I asked them all, I go, do you like eggs? Do you like fruit? Do you like blueberries? Do you like things that are easily replaceable, for instead of eating cereal? And it's so amazing that the mothers didn't even know that their kids would eat other things. And so, so I don't think, you don't look at it as taking care of yourself as a chore. I don't think that's how you look at it. Like I said, self-care is the new healthcare. There are no answers at the ER or the hospital in the United States of America. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now. Now, if you fall off a ladder or you're in a car accident, U.S. health emergency room is the best. But for the long-term management of chronic disease, whether it's cancer.
And you're saying cancer is a chronic condition. It's not an acute condition that you just all of a sudden, boom, you have cancer. You said it takes 10 years to get cancer. So it's something chronic. It's lifestyle.
It's lifestyle. Everything is lifestyle, though. What isn't lifestyle? Headaches are lifestyle, right?
Yeah, something acute like a car accident or something.
A car accident. That's what ERs are for.
Right.
Now, not for the things they're seeing. Their patients are using the emergency room as an urgent care or clinic now. Yeah. Not because they need a primary care doctor. But the primary care doctor today, guys, does not have time to talk to patients about lifestyle. They don't, okay? They have an electronic medical record that the doctor needs to fill out, and then there's the mandatory things they have to go over each of the patients depending upon age. And they don't ask, how's your sleep, water, food, activity, and stress? Those 5 things you need to be asking every single patient, every day, every time you see it, okay?
Vital signs.
What?
The new vital signs.
Yes, that's exactly. Yeah. And so if you're not asking them that, then you know nothing and you can help them with nothing. Yeah. Because what does a doctor have for treatment? Drugs, surgery, or both? Nothing else. And the electronic medical record is how many diagnoses you can have. So the more diagnosis you have, the better the doctor gets paid. And so, it's just the way that our system is. Now, years ago, you guys, when I started practicing medicine, it wasn't like this at all. Nothing like that. You came in, you got a physical, and you got the blood work, and the doctor had time to go over like their life and what's going on in their personal life and everything. And the doctor got paid 100%. So if you billed $200, you got $200. Now, if you bill $200, you're lucky you get $65. So the doctors, are constantly figuring out, juggling all of this. And 60% of doctors today work for a corporation. The corporation makes the rules. Yeah. Well, and there's rules. And no, Whitney, you're going to have a different set of rules than Danielle is. Because every individual is an original. And we need to go back to basics. Whether it's taking care of our child or whether it's learning how to take care of you, it's not that complicated. It is
because really this is creating and influencing the terrain within our body for things to grow or appear or get out of balance, right?
Right. It's all about the terrain. Look at all the microbiologists, right?
Yeah.
And everything. It wasn't the bug, it was the terrain. So if a person gets sick, it's a function of their terrain. And what you're thinking every day is part of your terrain because your thoughts are directing the cells. And then how do you eat? And, how much, what water and how much water are you drinking? Are you drinking purified water? You have to drink purified water today. You cannot drink tap water in any American city today. And then we don't get outside. Kids are not mobile and active every day. You have to get outside and be around trees and be around sunshine and be around, you got to immerse yourself in nature.
I think it's hard to imagine that it's that easy. I think for a lot of people, I hear it even in our clients. It's like the idea that something as simple as eating a whole food diet can transform your health trajectory. It's like we've been taught that there's going to be a pill to save us or a doctor to save us or something to save us instead of just coming back to the things that we do every single day. We're going to get into some Q&A, but just real quick, one more question before we do. Can you just speak a little bit about the difference between, a cancer that's kind of genetic versus the lifestyle disease of cancer, and how that overlaps with every time, you go to the doctor, it's like they want to know your family history of cancer. It's like that's really misleading, right? It's like, my grandmother died of cancer of the stomach. It's like that alone, I think, informs the narrative that cancer depends on what's happened in your family versus what you're doing every single day.
Right. I agree. I mean, even though perfunctorily we always ask, about, I always like to know everything about the parent, like when patients tell me, because what the patient had has been transferred on a spiritual, emotional, and physical basis. And so they think, oh, my mom had breast cancer, therefore I'm going to get breast cancer. So I want to break that cycle. Like if my mom had diabetes, that means probably I'm going to get it. And that's kind of always what's permeated always in people. So, and I always ask the patient, well, how was your mom really sick when you were growing up? Because that's going to impact the child on how they think, right? So for me, I want to understand it because I want to understand what's been downloaded to the patient. And people can't help but talk about themselves. The mother has this intimate relationship with the child, and they do talk about it, right? So it's already been programmed. I can't tell you how many women I have spoken to that have an anxiety disorder, and they recognize that they gave it to their kids because of their own anxiety disorder. So many women. Okay. So
that imprint.
Yes, that imprint. So it's very,
and then our microbiomes also get transferred as well. And unless you're actively making changes to those through your lifestyle,
right.
You could be set up for the same like your parents had.
Yes, exactly. And people who were delivered naturally have a different microbiome than someone who's had a C-section. And now we know everything affects the microbiome, right? Everything. There isn't anything that doesn't affect the microbiome. From the drugs we take, the food we eat, the thoughts we have, all the chemical exposures that we all have, okay?
Yeah.
So it's critical that we are aware of our microbiome, and everybody's microbiome is unique to them, right? So, I think it's important to understand family history from a real, cognitive way. So I know what the patient is thinking, okay? Because I hear it all the time with patients. Like the lady that just came in yesterday. Well, my mom had ovarian cancer, so she immediately thinks that she's going to get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which matters. It matters so much what you think you're going to get.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you can think yourself into problems. And so it's very important, even though I've said before, I've rarely ever seen a genetic cancer. Rarely ever in these 38 years have I seen a patient where I've seen a couple of prostate cancer patients. But how do we know that wasn't an intellectual imprint? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so because we know through epigenetics that who you are doesn't have to be triggered. The genetics of you doesn't have to be triggered. Yeah. I know my own mother had breast cancer, okay? My father had a heart attack after having a procedure, endoscopy. But I don't have any of those things. But I always said I will never be like my parents. Obviously, I'm much more healthier than my parents.
Yeah.
So, and I always think, well, I won't have any label. I don't want any label because as doctors, we should be de-diagnosing a patient. So we should be removing their diagnosis, guys.
Right.
That is powerful. I love that. I want to hop in. I want to make sure that we have time to get to our Q&As tonight. Sure. We'll start with the first question. And she says, I come from a family that has had cancer on mom's side. I've had 2 cousins pass away and an aunt. stomach cancer for 2 of them, and brain for the other. I currently have fibroids and an ovarian cyst. What can I do to help get rid of it? And also, additionally, your question was, can fibroids and an ovarian cyst become cancer? And tips to prevent that.
Well, that's a very good question. First of all, I'm not sure does it say how old the patient is, Whitney?
Liz, are you still here? You want to chime in? We'll see if she's still
44.
with us. 44. Yeah.
44. Okay, so most likely she's got fibroids and ovarian cysts. So we know that she's estrogen dominant because she's overgrown these fibroids. Hopefully they are fibroids, and I say that because sometimes there can be leiomyosarcoma. So, but typically most people on ultrasound imaging, it will show the characteristics of a fibroid. So that means she's probably deficient in progesterone. So most women start exhibiting signs of progesterone deficiency about 35. Aging really starts, you guys, around 30. Now, wrinkles start about in our 20s. Okay, it's really aging, but aging really at 30 is when aging starts. And that's why I want all young people to start thinking about their health right away at 30, because that's when you can make the most inroads. Because if you just start doing a few little things at 30, you're going to be so good at 40 and 50 and 60 and 70. So she definitely has a progesterone deficiency. So progesterone is made days 15 through 28 of your cycle. So she should partner with a doctor who truly understands that. If you have ovarian cysts, one of the best things you can do is put iodine on your abdomen. You can buy Lugol's iodine, put it on your abdomen. All of your cells need iodine to function, but iodine helps get rid of breast cyst and ovarian. Now, these are not medical recommendations, but it's things that, everyone can do. Iodine is an important part of our days today because we have all these other chemicals like fluorine and chlorine that are displacing our own iodine. And we need iodine for our thyroid, but we also need iodine for our brain, our heart, and all the other cells. And then I would have her do a cleanse because so much of the environment is full of plastic phthalates and other estrogen mimickers. And like heavy metals are estrogenic, plastics are estrogenic, insecticides and pesticides. So I'd have her do a cleanse. I don't know if Sakara has a cleanse, but you should be doing a cleanse. And then I tell people they should be doing liver flushes. It takes maybe from 6 p.m. to 9 the next day, they do a liver flush. I mean, the best thing anyone can do is cleanse their liver because what happens in your liver? Everything happens. You detoxify there. And today's world, there's so much going through our liver. It's overloaded and you feel so good. You have such clarity. Your eyes look good. Everything looks good when you clean out your liver. And that's something, again, you can do at home. I have that information in my book to do a liver flush.
What is in the flush from 6 to 9? What do you do?
So you start at 6 p.m. and you do Epsom salts and vitamin C. I can send it to you and then you can share it. How about that?
That'd be great. We can put it in the show notes. Yeah.
It's easy to do. And then I have it all typed up. So they do Epsom salts and vitamin C twice. They start at 6, so you don't eat after 2 p.m. And then before you go to bed, you take an amino acid called ornithine. You can buy it over the counter because that helps percolate from the liver. And then you do organic grapefruit juice and olive oil. And you got to buy really good olive oil because most people, olive oil is bastardized. And then you go to bed and then you wake up and you do vitamin C and Epsom salts 2 more times and you're done. And I'm telling you, you will feel so good. So the first time you do it and you don't feel good, that means you're toxic.
Yeah. You're detoxing.
And should this be like where you are
close to the restroom?
Yes.
Yes. Close to the restroom.
It sounds like a colonoscopy prep kind of plan.
Exactly. That's true. Exactly.
Okay.
This is I've used this liver flush for at least 30 years. So I
think we tried something like that back in the early days with Master Cleanse. Once you hit day 3 of Master Cleanse, you do the
salt
gallon
brush.
of the saltwater
Yes,
flush
you're right.
Yeah.
Yes,
cleans you out.
Yes.
Okay, there's another question. I was able to turn around a complex hyperplasia with atypia diagnosis with clean eating, Sakara, and progesterone. Now that I've been through menopause, I removed the progesterone device and wondering if you have other recommendations on how to manage hormones and maintain health. And then I might just add on to that. Can you talk about hormone replacement therapy in conjunction with this, especially as it pertains to perimenopause, menopause, and cancer?
Right, because
Right.
a lot of your last answers kind of pertain to this, right? If she had been low in progesterone in the past.
Right. So hormones are the most misunderstood, miseducated, absolutely. My next book, I want to talk about the emotional aspects of every hormone.
Mm.
Okay, because every hormone has an emotional function. And many of them have many emotional functions. And we as women, we're very emotionally driven, right? Because God created us to be these emotional creatures to take care of that baby 24/7. So we have to be able to just take it all in and do it and just serve. But if you don't have the emotional component of your existence, it creates an instability. And I have lived every hormonal conundrum. You guys, you have no idea. That could be a show or many shows in and of itself. And I don't want to go into detail about that. Another time, I would like to talk about it and what I learned from it and how, like, you can learn and how you can communicate to any doctor and get them to listen. Because I went to doctors after I had my twins. I was sick, but anyway, it was a long story and journey. And I went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and no one could help me. They literally said, I don't know what you have. I don't know what to do. Literally, I don't know what to do. And then I finally just figured it all out myself. But hormones are the natural chemical messengers in your body that control every single cell in your body. So estrogen not only affects your breast, your female development, it affects your brain, your skin, your hair, your bones, your heart, your immune system. And every other hormone has the same effects. Hormones are the natural drugs to your body. Because we have so many endocrine disruptors in the environment, nobody really has good balanced hormones, okay? But it's not your fault. It's our environment and what we've allowed, all the chemicals we've allowed in our environment. And they are all endocrine disruptors. And I would encourage people to read the book Silent Spring, okay, written by Rachel Carson. She talked about this. Everyone says she's crazy. And then, of course, now everyone says she wasn't crazy. And she was right on. And this was a long time ago, so 60, 70 years ago. So if you look at the hormonal, craziness we have today with Hashimoto's, with fibroids, the lady, ovarian cyst, fibrocystic breast. I mean, it is, and not just in females. Males, I would say that 80% of the young males or more, maybe 90%, but a very large amount. And I've been checking hormones on all my patients for years and years and years. It's not like a new thing for me. But the young boys, 25 and 30, all of them have abnormal levels of testosterone. So how are they going to function in their life if they don't have the hormone that rules their existence? Okay. And so women and men both, and most doctors, including endocrinologists, are not taking care of hormonal issues in both males and females. And I go there with every person. As soon as a person is 18, that's an adult, they're pretty much done with their hormones, meaning production-wise. And so we know whether their hormones are normal. So in a female, you have your thyroid, you have your pancreas, which makes insulin and glucagon. You have your ovaries, which make estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. And then you have your adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys like little hats. And they make over 100 hormones. all of these hormones are important. Anybody who tells you that estrogen doesn't matter, they've never lived through it. All the hormones matter. Estrogen doesn't cause breast cancer. If you look at all the studies, and this was done years ago with the Women's Health Initiative, and all the studies were not done with biologically identical hormones. They were done with Permin and Provera. Well, we should never be using synthetic hormones to replace something that should be biologically similar to ourselves, right? And so, but it's very clear now that estrogen doesn't cause breast cancer, all right? It's all the endocrine disruptors that are creating the chaos in our cells.
Mm.
You know,
So you are a fan of hormone replacement therapy, like bioidenticals, through perimenopause and menopause.
well, whatever age you need it, because I find that young people need this just as much as perimenopause, premenopause, and menopause. Okay.
And so it's the bioidenticals that you recommend.
Right. So, but let's talk about it though. So there's bioidentical thyroid, right? And then there's
Yeah.
synthetic thyroid. All right.
Mhm.
So if you talk about ovaries, yes, there's biologically identical estrogens, and usually you use a combination of estrogens, progesterone, and testosterone. Okay. And you usually need all three based upon your blood values and or 24-hour urine values. All right. Then you have your adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands are your stress, immune, and longevity glands. So the most common blood test to check that is DHEA sulfate. DHEA sulfate is the single most powerful repair hormone in your body. The higher your levels, the healthier you tend to be because it's the hormone of stress, immune, and longevity. So if it's low, it's easily fixable by taking small dosages of DHEA and taking glandulars or other adrenal support. All right. But you don't want to fix part of the body. We want to fix the entire body. Right. And then if you're 99, they say 99% of the people have metabolic disorders, guys.
Yeah.
Right. They have.
Not 100.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's very high. And so if you have metabolic disorders, look how many other problems you're going to have. Right. Because insulin and glucagon, that whole connection is related to the whole hormonal orchestra.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all connected.
It's
And
all
this is where you really need like a good practitioner. Cause like I get asked all the time, like, who do I recommend? All these, women going through what they think are perimenopausal symptoms. And I recommend them to, your daughter's company a lot, Raina, to just help people understand like that it's exactly what you said. You need a holistic approach, because I think a lot of times people just say, just take this hormone instead of really looking at, the spectrum of hormonal replacement options.
Right.
I mean, we could talk forever.
Yes.
We love you. Thank you so much for this work that you do and your brilliance and the light that you bring to a very, potentially scary subject. We like to end every podcast with light work. So light work is something you can give us and the listeners as kind of homework to help us shine our brightest light. So it can be from our conversation, it can be a practice, it can be something to do, whatever comes to you.
Right. Well, I think the most important thing that I've learned in my age now is like, do a check-in with yourself every day. How do I feel? Am I stressed? And what am I doing about that? And what are the thoughts that I'm thinking? And I always teach every patient to take every unfavorable thought and turn it into a positive affirmation. So if you're struggling with whatever you're struggling for, like turn it into, so thank you, God, for clarity, wisdom, discernment on this decision that I need to make. All right. Or let's say you're having trouble with a child. Okay. So thank you for the invincible direction how to handle this and take care of it. You have to ask for it. Okay. The planet will provide if we ask for it. But I think as women, we rush through our lives every single day, 24/7, especially of children. And I want you to be mindful and conscious of your day every single day. I know you might be working, you might be taking care of your children, but you need to take a moment of self-reflection. And what do I need to get better? Because we get better in little steps, not these big decisions, little steps. And don't be hard on yourself, because tomorrow can be and will be better.
So beautiful and so important. Thank you so much, Dr. Connealy.
You're welcome. I love you,
this
girls.
conversation was just filled with such powerful information. Can't wait for more people to hear this conversation as well. Thank you for all of your tips. Great seeing you. And thank you for everyone who joined tonight and who are part of the Sakara experience. Be sure to connect with each other